Hey guys, Caleb here with the DSLR Video Shooter, and today we're talking about things to consider when purchasing or picking up a monitor for your camera. There are so many awesome budget monitors out these days. Check out this video to see a comparison I did of 9 budget monitors under $200, and I've got several other ones on the channel. But there's a couple things you need to think about when picking up a monitor and things you should look for. There are a total of 8 questions you need to ask yourself before buying a monitor. The first 4 have to do with what kind of camera you want to use the monitor with. For example, does your camera have assist features like zebras for exposure or focus peaking, things like that? There's a chance that you're not going to need those features on a monitor if your camera has them, because the camera will be able to display those on your monitor. So that could save you some money if you don't need those features built into your monitor. The second question involving your camera is the resolution. Are you going to be using a 4K camera or a 1080p camera, yada yada yada. Next is connectivity. What kind of output does your camera have? Most of us are probably working with HDMI cameras. You want to ask yourself if you need HDMI pass-through to go to another device, things like that. The next set of questions involves how you intend to use the monitor with your camera. For example, if you have a camera with a pretty poor quality display on it, you might want a monitor that will really let you see fine detail so you can check your focus. Other people just want a monitor for making sure their composition is okay and they don't need an expensive monitor that's very sharp. Another thing to consider is exposure. Do you need a monitor that has assist features and has very accurate exposure so you can use that to judge things instead of the camera? And then finally, color. Some cameras have terrible monitors and displays on them, so when you input your footage it looks completely different, so you might want to consider picking up a monitor that has very accurate color rendition to help solve that. To figure a lot of this stuff out, I recommend grabbing your camera and an HDMI cable and hooking it up with a television in your home. That will let you see what kind of information goes from the camera to any HDMI device. This is important because not all cameras will display all information to an HDMI device. Case in point, the Sony a6500 has a bunch of great assist features, but most of those don't make their way over to the monitor. So things like zebras, focus peaking, none of that stuff you can see on a monitor, whereas Panasonic cameras often will output that. So you want to check those things. And if you have a camera that has zebras, for example, and it goes through HDMI, you don't need to spend money on a monitor that has zebras. So those are the questions you want to ask and how you can see what your camera will do with an HDMI device using your TV. Now let's go over several features you'll see or not see on monitors when you go shopping. The first one is 4K capable or compatible. A lot of the times you'll see a monitor advertised as 4K. There's very few monitors that actually are 4K natively, unless you get a really big one. What that means, and it's kind of confusing with the marketing these days, is that those monitors are designed to accept a 4K signal and then work with it to work on the monitor. Otherwise, if you just buy a normal monitor with a lower resolution than 4K, the camera is going to have to detect that, and then the camera will downscale the signal for the monitor. So this monitor right here is not a 4K capable monitor, but it still works with my GH5 at full 4K. But what's happening is the camera is seeing the monitor and having to downscale and output a 1080 signal. This is fine, but the problem is that the camera is now having to do some extra work. So things like autofocus and sometimes other things will take a hit in performance because the camera is having to do some extra processing. So buying a monitor that supports a 4K signal will give the camera a slight break, and the monitor will take care of that, and your camera won't take a hit in performance. Most of the time I don't worry about this, but if you're going to be out in the field shooting a lot of 4K, it's worth getting that extra upgrade in your monitor. Next up are different features you might want to look for and learn before shopping for a monitor. We'll start with exposure features. One of the most popular is zebras. It's a great way to quickly check different parts of exposure and make sure you're good to go. Things like human skin tone, make sure your whites aren't going too high and your blacks aren't dipping below a certain point. So that's one I usually look for if my camera won't output that. Another one is false color. This one is a little more visual. You see a bunch of different colors. Those colors have have values that mean something, and it's a great way to see what in your image is at what exposure level. You'll find those on a lot of monitors as well, and that's a great tool if you don't want to get into things too technical. Another one is histogram. I don't use histograms much, but if that's something you love to use, check it out for your monitor. And finally, waveforms is an incredibly powerful tool for checking exposure. You're not going to find it on anything under $500 though, so it might not be something to consider. Next up is focus features on monitors. One very popular one is focus peaking. This is essentially a technology and an assistant feature on your monitor that will let you see what's in focus in the image. It has several different flavors. Some uber sharpen things up, and then you'll see kind of what really sticks out as in focus. Others make the image black and white, and then you'll see like a red highlight on things in focus. And another flavor leaves the image alone, but adds white or a different color like yellow to the image where it's in focus. So if you're using lenses that have very shallow depth of field, or you have a monitor or a camera that's not super high res and it's hard to see what's going on the screen, focus peaking is a great tool. There's also zooming, which is just zooming in. That's a feature that's on a lot of monitors. And then there's pixel to pixel, P2P or PIP. And this essentially will take whatever resolution your camera is sending to the monitor and then zoom in to the resolution that the monitor is at. So if you have a HD or 4K, massive signal, but your monitor is 800 by 480, it's going to show 800 by 480 in the middle of the image, and it won't blow it up and artificially blow it up and zoom in. So it's a great tool and a really powerful way to check your focus on a monitor. Next up, we have framing tools. There's tons of different guides, center marks, safe areas. Another popular one is a way to show where the crop is going to be if you're going to add black bars on the top and bottom of your image. And then there's anamorphic de-squeezes, which if you're shooting with anamorphic lenses, will actually de-squeeze it for you so that you can see what your final image is going to look like at the correct aspect ratio. A lot of monitors also have audio meters on the actual image, which is a really handy way to see where your audio levels are landing, especially if your camera's not displaying them or you can't see your camera's audio levels. Another consideration is power. A lot of monitors will have a battery option but not a wall option. So you want to make sure you look for that little DC jack so that if you're sitting down doing something like this, you can just plug the monitor into the wall and not worry about battery life. Another thing to consider with power is looking for a physical switch. So I love to see a physical on-off switch on the monitor. That means when I turn it off, it disconnects power completely and your battery won't drain over time even while it's on the monitor. A lot of monitors, and it's terrible, but it's true, will have a button, and when you turn the monitor off, a little red light stays on, which is so annoying because that means you have to disconnect the battery to keep life on that battery. Otherwise, if you leave it on the monitor, it's going to drain over time. Finally, there are mounting and physical things with the monitor. Does it come with a hood? Is the hood high quality? How is the monitor going to be mounted to stuff? A lot of them have quarter 20s all the way around it, which is really handy to be able to mount it in different orientations. Is it plastic? Is it metal? Is it going to hold up over time? These are all things you want to consider when picking up a monitor. And then another big thing with the physical part of having a monitor is where are the connectors? A lot of them have them on the side or on the back of the monitor, and then a bunch of them have them underneath the monitor, which I try to avoid because usually that'll interfere with the camera and you're gonna have to get dongle elbow adapters. So try to find a monitor preferably with connectors on the back or on the side. And then finally, what's the situation with buttons and dials? This monitor only has an on-off switch and a little button you press that's also a dial to get through the menus. It's not a very good setup. If you're going to be turning on all those assist features we talked about earlier, try to find a monitor that has function buttons on the front. A lot of monitors have this, and you can program those buttons to do different things. I talked about one monitor in my 9 monitor comparison that had 7 function buttons, which is awesome. You can program a ton of different stuff. You don't have to touch the menus, you just hit those buttons and pull that stuff up. So I know that was a lot of information, but all things you need to consider if you're going to be picking up a monitor. So that's going to do it for this video. Hope you enjoyed it. Check out the link here to check out my other monitor reviews. Otherwise, you can watch fresh videos here at DSLR Video Shooter every single week. Thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in the next video.